4 miles north of Ann Arbor called Seeley Farm with my husband. We grow diverse veggies, raise broiler chickens, and cut flowers are a pretty big part of what we do too. I ran this SARE grant 2021 and 2022, so I was meant to present at last year's conference and then it was canceled because of the ice, so I'm here now. But yeah, the whole concept here is most of our cut flower marketing is wholesale, direct to florists and event planners and designers and such. And I have a personal love of native flowers and love to forage and market like foraged items to that end user. And so I thought SARE would be a great opportunity to actually trial a range of native plants for their value as a cut flower, both to me as a farmer, do they grow well, do they produce well, are they resilient, are they easy to grow, and also to the florists. So a big part of this was just understanding, is this marketable? Is it usable for a floral designer? Does it have the vase life, the stem length? Is it the right color at the right time of year? Sort of all these metrics. So I got some pretty pictures here of lupin, one of my personal favorites that blooms around May. That's not all natives, there's tansy there, so just don't look at that because I know that's invasive. But there's northern sea oats, and sanguisorba is not a native, but it's another great cut perennial.
Can you pull it out to presenter mode? Oh, no.
Oh, it's PDF, I couldn't. Is it?
It's fine.
Legible? Okay, sorry. Yeah, I had trouble saving this, so it's PDFs, but hopefully you guys can see that okay enough. So project objectives. This is another pretty picture of Joe Pie weed, which you'll learn at the end was like probably one of the winners of the trial altogether, a real popular one. I trialed 25 species of herbaceous native perennials. I couldn't include woodies in this trial because it's just a 2-year project through SARE and it wasn't enough time to really establish woody plants. I think that's like a ripe opportunity for someone to do that trial. Because there's a lot of great native woodies that work for floral design too. I tested bunches of cut stems in the marketplace by offering them to florists for free in exchange for feedback. So most of our wholesale marketing is through the Michigan Flower Growers Cooperative, which I was one of the founding members in Southeast Michigan. And we're connected to like 50 to 70 different wholesale florist buyers, depending on the season. And so it was just, we run a weekly market and a delivery truck, and so it was just like a really easy opportunity for me to just put free bunches in the market, free bunches on the truck, and say, just fill out this survey, you know, play with it, send me pictures, work with it, you know, just getting it in their hands, getting them comfortable. These are names they've never seen before. They're flowers they've generally never seen before. And they were thrilled. I mean, like, who doesn't want free flowers to play with? So that was fun. And so I aim to determine the most promising species of the trial and then promote them to other growers and buyers. So there's a big education component to this. And then, yeah, long term I had a goal for more growers to grow natives and then use them for marketing purposes, and then just increase awareness across florists of native flowers. So here are some sources. When I first set out to do this, I looked at the print material. There wasn't a lot available about using native flowers for floral design, but there's a few articles in here. Mount Cuba Center has done some great sharing with the public, and you know, just general like native plant sources. I also talked to native plant nurseries in my region. So there's Wild Type in Mason, Michigan, and Feral Flora in Ann Arbor, and just said, like, you've seen these plants grow and flower, like, how do they produce? And they didn't necessarily have the florist eye to cast on that, like, oh, this is the right color or like the right habit for floral design, but they can certainly tell me, like, this is a very showy flower. This is something that has like a bright eye-catching color you might want to try. And this picture here is eucalyptus on the top, spirea, and Amsonia hubrichtii on the bottom, which is a lovely fall, like golden threadleaf foliage. So what were my sources? The first part of this was actually buying in plant material. So I bought in plugs from Feral Flora and Wild Type, which I mentioned. North Creek Nurseries in Pennsylvania is a fantastic resource for natives. Some things I had to search further afield, so I trialed Filipendula and got some bare roots from Van Bergondenen, and Prairie Moon is another source, and American Meadows is seed. I think they might do plugs too, I'm not sure. So this is my list of plants. It's pretty long. I think I set out to do 20 and then it got to be 25 because people kept recommending other things for me to try. I know this is a long list to look at. I won't go through it all, but I've got the species and then the common names on there too. So first step, February 2021, was I just had to source in all my plant material. One of the struggles with like it being a 2-year grant is that some species weren't available to plant right away in the spring, so I did some fall planting in 2021 as well. And some of those failed due to frost heaving and stuff because I just got them in too late. But bought most of my plant material in the spring, and then in May we spaded beds, spread compost, and we used landscape fabric with burned holes to plant into, and I've got some pictures on the next slide or two. But that we just knew this was going to be an area of the farm that we weren't going to be actively like cultivating, or it's actually pretty far out from the main farmstead. So the landscape fabric just obviously controls weeds, and then we sort of mow between the pathways. And then I sort of piggybacked this project onto an NRCS EQIP contract I got for alley cropping, which was really fun. So alley cropping is like a not often used EQIP practice. It should be used more, but it's interplanting woody species with like a annual crop or even like perennial herbaceous crops. So a lot of alley cropping happens in the south, and they do pecans with hay in between. But I planted ornamental woodies, not non-native like hydrangeas and such. And then interplanted them with my herbaceous perennials. And so that was fun. It just added a little more funding to the program, and now I have this really cool, like very diverse little patch on the farm. So here's some pictures. Hopefully you can see these okay. So you can see here we used 6-foot wide landscape fabric with grass and clover strips between that we mow. And it's pretty effective at weed suppression. None of this was irrigated. I just did carefully timed planting in the spring and the fall and just prayed for rainfall. But yeah, you can see here, this is a row of some of the native. And then here, so every other row is a single row of woodies. I have like Cornus species, hydrangea, quince, lilac, viburnums, and then some oddballs like spicebush, and which is a native and a great cut too. This is like a more close-up planting of blue flag iris. Here's some of the lupins in full bloom here, schizochyrium. So just to give you an idea of like how we map this all out, these are the plugs that came in from North Creek. So harvest began the next season. So 2021 was all about getting everything established, the holes weeded, and there were some cuts in 2021, but they're short. When perennials just get going, they're not at their full productivity. So harvested bunches were distributed through the Michigan Flower Growers Cooperative weekly, and distributed to 42 different florists in the Ann Arbor, Detroit region. I distributed a total of 131 free bunches of flower and foliage, and everyone was thrilled. Here's some pretty harvest pictures. We've got Asclepias tuberosa, which is actually known in the floral industry. People grow it commercially, so that wasn't a hard sell. Some lupin here, blue flag iris, woolly bulrush, grass, northern sea oats, blunt tooth mountain mint, and this is the Filipendula just about to bloom. So crop failure. 9 of the 23 species either failed to thrive or didn't produce marketable stems by 2022. So they're still going. I did harvest some last year in 23. But for various reasons, Oryngum mucifolium and gentian they just require like super sharply drained soil, which we don't have, and I think they struggled from that. And Euphorbia corrallata, again, that's one I really want to try again. Euphorbia corrallata looks like a great, what's the word? Baby's breath substitute. It's like airy little white flowers. And then some plugs frost heave just because I got the plant material too late in the fall. And we have a very heavy clay soil, so if you put something in too late, it just pushes it out. And then some, they're still going, the penstemon, the physostagia. I had an amazing physostagia harvest last summer, so after the trial was done. That's a really fantastic plant, and I think if it made it in this trial, it would be like one of the top winners. That's obedient plant is the common name. Yeah, so those were the sad ones. But so I did two surveys. I did florist feedback survey, and then I did an on-farm survey, and they were sort of looking at different metrics depending on the on-farm survey was just me analyzing different qualities about the plant, its production, how it did, and so. But I'll start with the florist survey. I didn't get a huge response. Like you saw, I distributed 131 bunches. I got 20 unique survey responses. So not as good as I would have liked. I probably could have followed up more on that. But they were asked to evaluate on 7 criteria points. These are things that matter to florists. Color, stem strength, stem length, vase life, form and shape of the flower, overall aesthetic, and seasonality. And that might be confusing, but seasonality is, does the color work for you when you need it? So if you haven't worked with florists very much, they're very color specific, and fall weddings need to have fall tones and spring weddings need to have spring tones. So if you have like a bright yellow flower at the wrong time, like they maybe can't even use that, right? So trying to understand how marketable this was across them. This is hard to look at. These are the survey results from the florists, and I did a scoring rubric for them. The top of their list was Rattlesnake Master, which I didn't have much of because, like I said, it failed. That proved to be a really unique quality cut, and it looks a lot like Oryngum, which they use, and Echinops. It's like a thistle-like flower. So they were thrilled, but it has like a very smooth, cool, like very smooth stem. So that was really popular. The woolly bulrush surprised me as scoring pretty high. That was a gamble. I think it's a really cool, showy grass, but it's very brown. And brown is like cool for some florists, not cool for others, depending on your market. So, but the people who used it really liked it, and it dries really well. Joe Pye weed is at the top. I was surprised little blue stem they liked. It turns that fall coppery color. Solomon's Seal was a big hit, and I'll talk about that later. I didn't have much of that. It's a really slow to establish perennial, but it's a super hardy foliage. Yeah?
Do you know if that's deer resistant?
I don't know. I mean, mine's planted around our house where the deer don't come to.
It's kind of grow in shade to shade.
Yeah, it's a shade plant. Yeah.
Well, in the woods behind my house.
Does it? Okay.
deer don't
So
bother
they
it.
don't touch it? Yeah. Yeah, the hybrid is a lot showier than the native, as with most things. It's got that like white, margin on the leaf. But the native one is good too, and just really sturdy, holds up out of water, can be used in boutonnieres and things like that. Okay, so for the on-farm survey, this was data I recorded during that 2022 harvest season. I recorded growth habit, is it clumping, rhizomatous? I scored its emergence. This is something important to me as a grower. Is it in the spring, does it emerge early, mid, or late? I always prefer an early emerger because it's going to have more weed, be more competitive with the spring weeds. So that scored it a little higher. Companion crops, I recorded what other flowers are blooming at the same time. So this is part of that education component, like, oh, this blooms when the dahlias start, or like you get your early summer snaps when this one's blooming, and kind of like teaching like little combos of like how these species could be integrated in design. I recorded harvest window, vase length, yield, and market value. And so there's my also hard to read results. But I did a scoring as well. This is sorted from highest to lowest. It was out of 25. The very top winner for on-farm survey was the Northern Sea Oats. The Woolly Bulrush scored really high, and Schizochirium and Picanthinum, the blunt-tooth mountain mint. A lot of these got a pretty high score because they have a very long harvest window, which as a farmer I love. Like the Northern Sea Oats and blunt-tooth mountain mint, and even like the two grasses, they can be cut for like 4 to 8 weeks, depending on what the season does. So Northern Sea Oats, you can start when just like those seed heads are starting to shimmer, to when they fully flatten out, to copper in the fall. And so from a farmer's perspective, there's so much value in that. A lot of perennial cut flowers have a 10 to 14 day harvest window, and it's brutal. And especially when you're trying to market like something that florists aren't particularly used to, like lupins or like blue flag, they use irises, but like blue flag iris. It's like just making all the pieces work of like, okay, it's blooming, I'm bringing it to market, you want it, it's gonna be over soon, get it, you know, like just, so the ones that just had a longer harvest window scored higher. And so yeah, my quick and dirty synopsis of like what I would recommend for natives for cut flowers. Joe Pye weed is a very top winner. It is one of those short harvest window ones. It browns out fairly quickly, but it is, I love it because it's a problem solver. It can be planted in boggy, wet areas, which we have a lot of on our farm. And so anything that did well in those conditions scored high, or drought tolerant on the other end of the spectrum. And it's a beautiful color. It's like, it actually comes in different colors if you get into some of the cultivars. And the florist loved it. It's like a filler flower. Asclepias tuberosa, that's the orange milkweed. Florists kind of know it already. The orange can be hard to market depending on what kind of florist you're talking to. But that's a really great one. And that kind of has a bit more of an extended harvest too. It will sort of like bloom multiple stems. The Northern Sea Oats, like I said, and the blunt tooth mountain mint, very well received. Northern Sea Oats has a great like fall look when it turns copper. The mountain mint, the one setback of that is the stems are pretty brittle, so handling, you have to be careful, it'll crack on you. But like the scent is to die for. It's like toothpaste mint. It's so good, and it's just a cool color, cool leaf shape, and the florists really love that. And Baptisia foliage is an easy winner. You can market the flowers too. They're really short window. It like blooms when lupin blooms, but the foliage persists all summer until it starts to get that like black spot stuff. Florists love it. It's like a eucalyptus substitute. It's super hardy. It can last out of water. And then some plants I'd recommend with caveat. Lupin has like such a special place in my heart, and I grow the native and I grow lots of cultivars of it. And I mean, it's been very aggressively hybridized over the years. There's a high market appreciation for it, but it's a poor vase life. It's a hollow stem. It's a little hard to handle, and then it starts to shed those lower florets as it sits. The Solomon seal, high market appreciation. It's a great solution for shade for farmers, but it's very slow to establish, and it's very slow to recover from cutting. So you have to be pretty judicious in taking leaves off of it so you don't set back the plant too much. Blue flag iris, high appreciation. It's a good color. Little tough with the harvesting time. You have to get it when the bud is like just cracking color. It's a good solution for waterlogged soils. Ansonia hubrichtii was also a real crowd pleaser. It's got a very sweet, like ice blue flower in the spring, and then that fantastic like gold threadleaf foliage in the fall. It's a lot harder to handle in the spring. It's got a milky sap, just like milkweed. And so getting it to hold in the vase was hard for me and the florists in flowering stage. But I think by fall, when the foliage starts to turn like coppery and yellow, I think the sap isn't running as much because it actually has a much better vase life and it's not all like milking out on you. But there's different approaches with that. People like burn the stems, or you can dip them in boiling water to try to stop the sap flow. And then the two grasses, they're obviously extremely hardy, extremely productive, but aesthetically, you'd have to test and see if your market wants something like that. This last slide is a bloom time calendar that I produced as part of the grant with a graphic designer. And I can share like the more complete replicable format of this. But the whole idea is I wanted a tool to share with florists and growers to just say, and this has actually been a dream of mine since before the Native Flower Project, is just wanting to educate florists and growers on bloom time for any flowering perennial, because like I said, sometimes that harvest window is so short. And I just really they love lupins, and it's like, I know it's gonna be the first or second week of May, it's not gonna be the fourth week of May, and it's not, although this year, who knows, but. So just having a visual for them as they're planning out like events and weddings, and as farmers plan out their fields and harvest and crop time, knowing when roughly it's going to bloom. And then the colors are coded for like, is it a foliage, is it a filler? Sorry, that's really hard to read, but so that's a great resource. And then, did I already? Oh wait, and that's it, yeah. So, yeah.
We'll get that.
I don't have it on our website, but I can share with MIFS, or I don't know what the best way to distribute the calendar is.
Turn it into SARE as part of your report?
Yes. Yeah, so SARE has it. Yeah, it should be, if you look up the trial on SARE. I believe so.
Other questions?
Yeah.
For one, which flower, are there any of them that you've ripped out of your garden other than the ones that died?
Well, so Solidago, goldenrod was in the trial. I like it. It's also grown commercially, and it's very, very cheap for florists. So I just didn't think it was marketable because it's available for so cheap every week of the year. It's like 60 cents a stem or something. So that one, I mean, it's still there. I haven't ripped it out, but I'm not actively harvesting it. And the other one is Rudbeckia. Another, people consider it a ditchweed or too common. Yellow's a hard color to market sometimes to florists. So again, it's still there. It's in the planting, but I don't cut on it a whole lot anymore. Yeah.
How much of each plant are you cutting? Are you, by the end of the season, cutting the whole plant?
Yeah, so that's a really important component of this, and I forgot to include that in here. So to get the benefit of planting native plants, we have to leave the bloom and the seed heads and the foliage. So what really helped me with this trial was I bought a significant quantity of each species. So for most of these, I was planting 75 to 150 individual plants of each of the 25 species, with the idea that I'm cutting a third and leaving 2/3, right? So yeah, it's not like your Snapdragon or your Zinnia or whatever else where you're trying to get as much marketability off them as you can, right? There's no benefit if we don't leave the stems, so good point.
I don't know if you said, but how much land are you working on? And did you space them per suggestion, or did you?
I think most of these I spaced just for uniformity. They're 12 to 18 inches in a row and 3 to 4 rows per bed. But you could go closer, or I think they're pretty forgiving. And then the total plot, including the alley cropping, so the shrubs and whatnot, is probably half an acre. My guess, but there's grass strips between, it's not intensively cropped, so it's spread out.
So those beds are 4 feet wide, right? Is that how they're
They're 4 feet wide, yeah, and then Yeah.
Has this translated into demand from the florists you're selling to now that they have to pay?
Yeah.
for the
So it's slower, but like Joe Pyeweed, lupin, and the Amsonia have probably, they now like know the names of those plants and will ask when they're coming, which is really cool. Some of the other ones, you know, I don't know, they don't get that excited about grasses. So, but yeah, it's been great to see. And what I didn't include here was some florists shared with me photos of design work that they did with the free bunches, which is really cool because that's part of the education piece too, is like florists teaching other florists, like, look what I made with this brand new thing you never heard of. So, yeah.
If you were like creating bouquets to sell on your own without selling to florists, like without necessarily having to follow traditional florist ideas, and just doing something that you find aesthetically pleasing, do you feel like you could use like solely the perennial plants to make nice bouquets that would sell?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. And I think there's definitely like a subsection of customers who really look for that like naturalistic aesthetic. And, you know, this grant was really aimed at the wholesale industry, but it's all translatable to direct to consumer, you know, farmers market bouquets and such. I mean, you can plan out like an abundant season with just perennials. If you, especially with that bloom time calendar, you could sort of, because I included on that calendar, it's not just natives, I should clarify. So like peonies are on there and hydrangea and dogwood and other things. So I really wanted to include the scope of what you can grow for perennial cut flowers in Michigan or the Midwest. So, yeah.
Can you share a little bit about writing the grant, managing the grant? Was it good to work with SARE?
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic program, and I would encourage any farmer to participate. Joan was running it at the time, and they had like Zoom that I attended that really kind of like demystified and help you walk through the whole application process. They have an online form that's easy to fill and enter your information for reporting and such. And I think she shared in that session that it's a pretty like low competition grant, like 50% of applicants generally are funded in any, I don't know if that's changed, but it's good like low hanging fruit if you're just dipping your toes in the grant process. And I think it seems to me like they're just excited about farmers trying new things on their property that are sustainability related, either like for your community or for the environment or you know, financially sustainable. So I would encourage anyone to go for it. Yeah.
So a lot of the mainstream specially cut varieties that a lot of growers use, they you know, the timing, the time of day that you harvest can be very important, and also post-harvest handling techniques can also be pretty important. Did you use a lot of the typical common post-harvest methods to keep these?
Yeah. So I definitely like it. It's hard with some of these new crops because there's no like literature on how to handle them. But
that's why I was asking.
Right.
How did you figure that out?
Well, so I love Specialty Cut Flowers. That book is such a great resource. I'm forgetting now who wrote that, but that is a crop by crop list for anyone growing cut flowers. That's like my Bible.
Judy Loshman?
Oh yeah, Judy Loshman. Yeah. And it doesn't include all crops, but it's pretty expansive, and it just covers like what varieties to grow, some quotes from farmers, post-harvest handling is a big component, harvest stage. And so like for things like, I knew Amsonia, I tried a lot of Asclepias species, and unfortunately the tuberosa was the only winner, just because that milky sap is so hard to contend with. But so I looked at like information about like Icelandic poppies or other plants that have like a milky sap to understand post-harvest handling. But yeah, it was just kind of like best practices, you know,
And
like.
they worked, generally speaking, worked pretty well.
Yeah, except for the milky ones. And then the hollow lupin is challenging. But you know, there's a lot of advice for delphinium, which is also a hollow stem. And so I think anything that would apply to that could apply for lupin too. People do like put like little cotton balls in the end and all kinds of crazy stuff. So, yeah.
Did you normally harvest in the morning, is that what you
Yeah,
typically do?
as early as I could, yep, and just whisk it into the cooler right
Cooler,
away.
okay.
I don't use any treatment in my waters because I'm, organic, and so just kind of everything super clean. Your clippers are clean, your buckets are clean, and yeah, just try to get it cold fast.
Is there anything that didn't like it in the cooler? Do you remember?
Not that I observed. But if I'm trying to remember, Rudbeckia probably, I feel like maybe would resent that, but yeah,
Thank you.
it's not popping out. Great. Any other questions? Okay, time's up. Thank you.